I started the recording, Kelly, whenever you want to
Oh,
start.
perfect. Thank you, Mary. Just so you know, everyone, this is being recorded, and good afternoon. My name is Kelly Kunkel, and I'm here with Mary Schroeder, and we are extension educators in health and nutrition with the University of Minnesota Extension. And we are so happy today to be here to talk about cooking and shopping for one or two. And so we know that sometimes it feels like shopping or cooking for one or two can seem like a challenge. And we're going to talk about some of those challenges and how to make it a fun time. So our objectives today will be to understand the benefits of healthy shopping, cooking, and eating for one or two people, and to identify tips and techniques that will help make meal planning fun and creative. So let's start by talking about some of the benefits of cooking and shopping and eating for one or two. Certainly it can be more nutritious and we can create some tasty meals. Homemade meals are usually more nutritious and better than tasting than eating meals at restaurants, which can be a great health benefit. Another benefit, you can enjoy the foods you like. You don't have to depend upon other people and their taste preferences for what you like. So if you want to have chili for breakfast, that's just fine. If you want to have a bowl of oatmeal for lunch, that's also fine. So you can really tailor your meals to the things that you like. Another benefit is that you can plan meals ahead. So that you can make your own freezer meals. You can make a meal once and eat it again and again. Sometimes we call those do-overs or leftovers or encore meals, but it really is a great way to do some menu planning, meal planning, and extend the food that you eat. So you can make it once and enjoy it later. If you want to prepare meals from a large recipe, you can do so. So a larger recipe can be adapted. You may have always used that recipe for your a large family, and now there are ways that you can cut it down so that you can still enjoy that same recipe. And then depending upon the food and the packaging, it can be less expensive to prepare foods for one or two. So those are some of the benefits. What are some of the opportunities of cooking and eating for one or two? Well, sometimes it's easy to, you have to plan ahead. Otherwise, it's going to be that bowl of cereal or oatmeal for every meal without planning ahead and thinking about what you're going to make. It's easy to get in a rut, maybe making the same 2 or 3 things each time for a meal. And so that, again, that planning ahead is so important. So it's easy to get tired of the same food over and over. So for example, if I make a pot of spaghetti, which sometimes doesn't freeze real well for later, for one or two people, I might be eating that same spaghetti 2, 3, 4 times in the week, and that can be challenging. Sometimes it feels like it costs more. I mentioned earlier that one of the advantages is it costs less, but sometimes it feels like it costs more because if you're looking at some of the smaller cans of vegetables or fruits, because of the packaging, it seems like it will cost more for you. And we'll talk more about that. And if you're cooking for one, sometimes two, it doesn't always feel rewarding. If you cook for a larger group, people might say, oh, this is a great meal. This is wonderful. But if it's just you, you're going to have to remind yourself, hey, this is a great meal. This is wonderful. And sometimes it's just a matter of you've always cooked for more than one or two people. And so it's difficult and challenging to see how do I go about cooking for one or two instead. Can anybody think of any other opportunities or just benefits of cooking for one or two? If you think of anything, why don't you type that into the chat? And Mary is going to be going next, and she's going to talk about meal planning.
Hi there, my name's Mary, and I'm also an extension educator with the University of Minnesota. And I feel like I have quite a bit of experience of cooking for just one person because in my early 20s to 30s, I think it was about 15 years where I did a lot of just solo cooking for myself. And I understand kind of the struggles that it is planning for just one person. And some of the benefits too that you can do. So we're going to talk about some of those different things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is meal planning. And I think when people hear this word meal planning, a lot of times they just feel like, oh, that's so much work to plan my menus out ahead of time. It's kind of drudgery, but we're hopefully going to give you some tips today to make it a little bit easier, because meal planning really does help quite a bit. It helps you save time and it also helps you save money. And especially when you're cooking for just one or two, it can really help you be much more strategic in terms of the foods that you are doing. So example, here are just some foods that I like: meatloaf, barbecue, stir fry chicken, scalloped potatoes, bean burritos. And what we'd like you to do now is to just take, we're going to actually give you about a minute and a half and write down some of your favorite foods. A lot of times we get in ruts, and by writing down these favorite foods, that's going to help you, and we're going to use it in some activities later. So Kelly's going to put a timer up. And I've also have a list here as you're writing these things down, just some categories to help you think a little bit more broadly about some of the foods that you do like to eat. So think of, what are some of those egg dishes you like, beans and legumes, maybe there's some fish dishes you like, breakfast foods, vegetables. It could be a whole variety of different things. So go ahead and just grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen and start writing down some of those favorite foods. And Kelly, I am not seeing the countdown on my screen now. I saw it earlier, but I'm not seeing it now. Now I see it I see it in your photo there.
That was a minute and a half, Mary.
Okay, went fairly quickly there. So I'd encourage you just, you can keep this list handy and continue to keep putting things on the list. And Kelly, do you want to share the slides again, please? Thank you. Um, and what I actually do with my list at home like this is I keep it in my recipe box. And then when I am doing my meal planning, it's really easy to pull out and use. Another strategy I have used when I'm kind of trying to think of some different foods to eat, especially if I'm kind of in the rut, I will go through either online or with an actual recipe book and kind of write down some different ideas of recipes I might like to try that I haven't tried before. And I put the source on there and then either the page number or the website so that I can refer to those, because again, it's just nice to have some different variety, especially if you're cooking for one person. That's helpful. And especially, we have access to a lot of different resources, whether it's a cookbook you get from the library or if it's a website that you find online of different, cookbooks or websites that are designed for cooking for one. So that's also very helpful. And let's see, Kelly, I think I need permission to share or to advance the slides there too. So. Okay, the next thing we're going to start talking about is kind of some quick meal things to kind of keep on hand. So if you're cooking for one, it's nice to have those options of different things that you can do and have on hand. So one of the first things that you want to keep in mind is in terms of your fruits and vegetables. These are things that it's nice to make sure you're always having in a meal. I like to just kind of in the back of my mind, I go, okay, when I'm having a meal, I have a fruit and I have a vegetable, and I kind of go check, check. And that way I know I'm getting my fruits and vegetables, because those are foods that we typically don't get enough of in the United States. So making sure that we are getting those is important. In terms of fresh, frozen, dried, canned, they're all good sources. Fresh is nice because it has a lot of different variety that you can get fresh, but frozen is also good and really just as nutritious. One thing to keep in mind is that if you have like broccoli that's frozen, it might actually have more nutrition in it than the fresh broccoli that you bought a week ago and still have in your refrigerator, because that broccoli is frozen, quick frozen right away to really preserve those nutrients. So there really isn't necessarily one that's better than the other. It's just that you have to see what works best for your situation. Canned fruits and vegetables are also nice options. There's things you can do to make the canned a little bit more healthy. You can rinse the ones in syrup off with some water to get rid of that excess sugar. And same with the sodium and the salt. You can wash things off to get rid of that extra salt in your canned vegetables. So those are always nice to have on hand. Potatoes, they can be sweet or white potatoes. Again, if you're thinking of cooking for one or two, you're probably going to want to buy the potatoes in a smaller amount if you don't use them a whole lot. The nice thing about sweet potatoes is you can typically find them in different sizes. Sometimes you'll look at the store and there'll be a really big one, and other times they'll be smaller. I like to encourage people to try both the white and the sweet potatoes because they have different nutritional values. White potatoes are great sources of potassium, and then sweet potatoes are a great source of vitamin A and some of your other phytonutrients. So encourage you to try that out too. Bread and tortillas, those are obviously really important things to have on hand. And the nice thing about those is you can be really flexible with the different things that you do with them or what you put on them. I'm just going to share a quick meal idea here with tortillas that we've been doing quite a bit at our house lately is we just have a can of refried beans and we open that and we kind of leave it in the refrigerator. And then we also have tortillas. And then in the evening, if someone's a little bit hungry, they can just spread some of those refried beans onto the tortilla, add a little shredded cheddar cheese onto it, and then heat it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. So again, that can make a really quick meal for one person. And again, it doesn't take a lot of dishes, and also nice for those quick meals when you just need something kind of quick. Maybe you're getting home late and you want something quick. So that's another nice idea. Pastas are also very nice to have on hand. And the nice thing about pasta is that it doesn't go bad. It can sit on your shelf for quite a while. So it is something that you can measure out what you need for just one or two people. So that's a nice thing about pasta. Brown rice, we encourage people to choose brown rice over white rice because it has the outer layer or the bran on it, which has more fiber and nutrients than the white rice. It does take a little bit longer to cook, so that's something important to remember. We can also buy instant brown rice, which takes only about 10 minutes to cook. And here it's kind of when when you're cooking for one or two, where you kind of look at some of your different trade-offs, is you might say that, I just don't want to take the time to prepare maybe brown rice for 45 minutes. So then you never make it. But maybe if you had a box of instant rice, which costs a little bit more, but because it takes less time, you might be more apt to use it. So again, that would be a time when you might go, I'm just going to use the instant instead of the regular. Costs a little bit more, but I'm more apt to eat it. Eggs are good to have on hand. And I already talked about some of your canned beans. There's a whole variety of different beans that you can have. Canned meat and fish, whether it's the tuna or the chicken, those are nice. And if you have the freezer space, it's also nice to keep some of that frozen meat on hand, whether it's ground beef or frozen chicken. Cheese is another good resource or food to have on hand, as well as yogurt and milk. And I like to mention with the milk, it's always nice to have that fresh liquid milk in your refrigerator. But I always encourage people too to keep some dry or shelf stable milk available too, because that way, if you're running out and you don't get to the store, especially now we have in Minnesota, we have winter weather coming up. You might not get to the grocery store if the roads are bad. You can just mix up some of that dry milk with some water and you have that available. And there's also the shelf stable liquid milk, which has been heated to a high temperature so that it doesn't go bad on the shelf. And again, just something else that's nice to keep available. So you always have some of that milk available if you aren't able to get to the grocery store. Okay. And then just kind of some other items that are nice to have on hand when you're cooking for one or two, things like spaghetti sauce, cream soups, tomato sauce or pasta, salsas, broths or bouillons. I like to use, rather than buying the container of liquid broth for, and you maybe only need half a cup and then it's like, oh, it's in your refrigerator and then ends up going bad. A lot of times I prefer to buy like the bouillon or even like the refrigerated kitchen base, because that you can just take out. If you need a cup, you just take out a teaspoon, add it to a cup of water, and you can really mix it as you need it versus having a big container that maybe you aren't actually going to use. So that's a really nice tip for cooking for one in terms of the broth and the bouillon. Seasonings, nice to have a variety on hand, and same with your condiments, because those are different ways that you can add different, tastes and flavors to things without having to have a lot more things in your kitchen. Okay. So I see people are busy putting things in the chat already. It looks like we have lots of good ideas, and Kelly's kind of monitoring that and putting some things in there. But this is a nice chance for you to share ideas too. So what are some of those things that you like to have on hand for a quick meal? So if you have some ideas, go ahead and just put those into chat. What are some of those things you keep handy for those meal ideas when you're like, I need something quick and easy to have? So we'll just give people a quick moment to write some of your ideas into chat. I see someone had just put in that when they do bouillon, a lot of times they will take, if they have extra, and put in ice cube trays. That's a really good idea. And so you could just grab out an ice cube tray when you need it. Baked potatoes, yes, that is a really good one. Quesadillas. The nice thing about quesadillas is you can do a whole variety. You can just do a cheese quesadilla, or you could put chicken on there. It's also a nice way to utilize some of those leftover vegetables. You can just keep a container either in your refrigerator if you're going to know if you know you're going to use them right away, or keep it in the freezer if you're not going to use it right away. So if you have like maybe a fourth of a cup of leftover corn, you can put it in the container. You could use it on quesadillas, or you can put it in the freezer. And a lot of times will just, when I have about 2 cups, then I know it's time to make some soup, and you can just dump it in the soup. So that's a nice way to use some of those leftovers that you might have if you're just cooking for one person. Okay, seeing other things going here, eggs and toast, that's good. Chips and salsa. Crock pots are handy for doing different things. Berries with yogurt, a variety of different things out there. So it's nice to, again, have some of those ideas. And in addition to that list of your favorite foods, you might want to maybe just highlight some of those that are those quick and easy ones, because it is nice to have those handy, or, ones that are really simple to do if you're just cooking for 1 or 2 people. So here's something that is really kind of a neat thing to do if you're cooking for 1 or 2 people. This probably makes enough for 4 to 5 servings, depending upon how much you want, but you can be really kind of flexible with it. So we're going to talk about that as we go through here. So this is the mix and match casserole, and this is designed so that it has a starch, a protein, a vegetable, sauce, and then some type of flavoring. And basically, it's kind of like taking a tuna noodle casserole and being creative with it and saying there's all sorts of different starches you can use and different protein sources. So how it works is that you pick a starch, whether it's pasta, brown rice, or potatoes. And if you want, you can actually go through and do this right now, and you can have your evening meal all planned out for you. So you would pick one of those. Then you would pick a protein source, whether it's ground beef, chicken, ham, fish, chicken. You can also use canned beans if you want to make it more a vegetarian item. And then pick a vegetable. Again, it could be frozen, canned, or fresh. And then a sauce, such as like a cream soup, or you can make your own white sauce. You could use tomato soup, tomato juice. And then whatever type of flavor you would like. If you like a little bit more flavor, you might want to add some onion to it, some celery, maybe some garlic salt, or just plain garlic powder, salt and pepper to taste. And then finally, you can top it with some cheese, crushed dried cereal, or anything else that you would like to give it a little bit more crunch or something. Okay. And it really does work well. I've tried this with quite a few different things, and it's really fun to see how you can mix and match. And again, especially if you're cooking for one person, it allows you to use some of your leftovers. So for example, if you're making pasta one night, you can maybe make some extra pasta, and then you have it ready to go for this casserole. It is fun to try some of the different combinations. The first time I did this, I was actually at a workshop, and we had to draw we had to draw a starch, we had to draw a protein, we had to draw a vegetable, and then we had to make the dish. And this is what my group ended up with. We had brown rice, we had tuna for the protein, vegetables was canned peas, and then for the sauce, we had tomato soup. And I was like, this is just going to be like awful. How could we end up with such an awful combination? But I was pleasantly surprised that it really did taste good. So again, it's pretty fail-proof in terms of how all those different combinations work together. So encourage you to try that. We will be sending this recipe out to you in some of our follow-up information. If you are just cooking for one person, or two and just don't want to have a lot of leftovers, this is really easy to make smaller. Wherever it says 2, you can just cut it in half and have like 1 cup of pasta. So then you may be wondering, well, what am I going to do with, half a can of cream of soup? It might give you an opportunity to use it in another casserole. You could certainly do that. Or maybe instead of having like making a large recipe of tuna noodle casserole, maybe you'll use that can of soup and make half a recipe and make it the tuna noodle casserole. And then maybe you'll use the other half of the recipe, half of the can to make like a chicken rice hot dish. So you can really kind of mix and match that way and get some different ideas. The same concept can also be used for like soups, salads. Bowls are really popular right now where you're just kind of doing a lot of mixing and matching. And again, I think this is a great way to use the leftovers that you might have. If you have a little bit of leftover chicken, if you have some leftover vegetables, again, you can just keep them, and maybe one evening that's your mix and match casserole night. You dump everything you kind of have together, and then you have, your evening meal, and it's going to vary every week depending upon what your leftovers are. Okay, a couple helpful hints in terms of the menu planning. We kind of have now your list of ideas and kind of some foods to keep on hand is really just start simple. Don't feel like you need to do a menu plan that's going to have, 3 meals, 7 days a week. That's, if you're not used to doing menu planning, that's a pretty big hurdle to tackle. So I encourage people, maybe just start with 1 meal during the week and then start maybe just with 5 days, like your weekdays. And again, start simple. It's nice to start with the entrees first, whether your entree is a protein-based meat, or if you have a vegetarian diet, you can plan around that. But that kind of gives you a nice starting place. So what's that main food that you're going to want? And then you can kind of go, like I said, make sure you have some type of vegetable and some type of fruit. A lot of times when I do my menu planning, I will just write down what the main entree is going to be. And I know I have a variety of fruits and vegetables, frozen cans. So then I'll just like, oh, if I'm going to have a rice casserole, I know I like green beans with that. So then I'll just grab that. So you don't have to plan everything out. It's really kind of what works best for you. It's also nice to involve others. If you have that second person that you're helping to cook for, making sure that you're kind of getting some different ideas for the meal plan. Also being ready to switch, maybe you have your meal plan for the, 5 days, and you get home on Tuesday and you're like, I'm really not in the mood for, grilled cheese sandwiches tonight, but I was planning on having mac and cheese on Friday. You can just flip flop because you have, your supplies and everything there. Also save your menu plans. That's really helpful. If you do it for 4 weeks, and after 4 weeks, you can actually just start repeating it because that's about a month, which is a nice amount. So you don't have to start from scratch every time. Something else that helps when you're kind of planning out your menus is to kind of think a little bit about variety. And the next 3 slides are kind of going to show you some different ideas you can use for that variety. So one way you can get variety is by looking at the protein. So you have chicken, eggs, beef, fish, beans, and pork. And you can kind of put this on the top of your menu or pull out that list you made earlier. And you might go, okay, beef. Tonight I'm going to have roast beef and mashed potatoes for my beef item. And then you might say, well, tomorrow night I'm going to have the refried bean on a tortilla. Maybe Wednesday you have some leftover roast beef, so you're going to have a roast beef sandwich. So kind of gives you an idea so you can vary things up a little bit by the protein type. You can also do it by the food type. Maybe, for example, you might want to have a soup one night, then a casserole, a wrap, a sandwich, those bowls that are really popular, meat and potato. Just different things to get you kind of out of that rut and being a little bit more creative with the foods that you are making. And again, if you're cooking for 1 or 2, you can kind of look at it and go, okay, if I have, maybe I'm going to have a casserole, on Monday night, and then Tuesday I'm going to have a wrap, but for lunch on Wednesday, I'm going to have my leftover casserole. So kind of trying to incorporate those things in there too for the leftovers so you don't have a lot of food waste. And this is the way I kind of like to do it, is a little bit more by theme. You might have Taco Tuesday. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have tacos every Tuesday, but maybe it's more that, Southwestern or Southeast, kind of that Tex-Mex idea. So you can do that for the menu nights. You can also do Friday favorites, that's another one that works really well. One dish meals, especially if you're cooking for one, those work really nice. For example, that make a mixed casserole, you can do that just in a casserole and heat it up that way. You only have one dish to clean, which is nice too. So again, a variety of different ways that you can look at doing some menu planning. And now I'm going to turn over to Kelly, who's going to talk about grocery shopping.
Thank you, Mary. There are so many great suggestions and ideas in the chat for food, and somebody asked if we could share that chat, and we certainly can, but later on we'll be doing an activity that you can also see some of the different ideas. So save those suggestions, and what it's sharing with me is that the inspiration and the wisdom is in the room. You guys are doing it. You're cooking for one or two already and have great ideas. So just share those ideas with others. So we got our meals planned. Now we're going to go shopping for those meals. And how do we do this for one or two and still save money at the grocery store? We know the food prices are on the rise. We can tell by going to the grocery store that things are more expensive. They're also more expensive when we eat out. Noticing that the menus are the foods on the menus are getting a little more expensive. So to start off with, we need to know what's on hand. That's a little bit easier to do when there's one or two people in the house as opposed to a whole group of people, especially teenagers in the house, where you might think you had a food item on hand and you go back and it's not there. But it is important to kind of plan that meal around what you have on hand, because you want to be able to use that as before purchasing newer things. So that's that first in, first out idea of planning meals. So knowing what you have on hand is that first step. Then we are going to get ready to go shopping. And so know your sales flyers, both paper and digital. In my area, the sales flyers for grocery stores come out on Tuesday. So I'm going to know that on Tuesday, I'm going to look through those ads and see what's on sale. There's always that price leader, those items that are just very low in price and will encourage you to go to the store. So look at what is available at the grocery store. There's also digital flyers, and one of my favorite apps right now is called Flip, F-L-I-P-P, and I can put in my zip code and get all of the grocery flyers for my area, and it gives me that information without having to purchase the newspaper, and there's no cost to the app. So there are other digital flyers, but that's one app that I have used that I've found success with. You're going to want to clip or download your coupons. Which ones will work out for you? Now, a coupon is only a savings if it's a food item that you're going to eat. If it's something that you were never planning to purchase in the first place, you're going to be spending more money. Another thing to watch is that sometimes food coupons are more, with a name brand are still more expensive than if you bought the store brand without the coupon. So be sure to look at the difference in costs as well as the size of the food item. One advantage to coupons is it's something that you might want to think about trying, but it's a little more expensive, but the coupon gives you motivation and a reason to try something new and experiment with something new. And then organize your list. It's one way to save money at the grocery store is arranging your list according to the aisles in the grocery store. And the grocery store is really set up to get us to part with our money. And so if you think about any grocery store that you go to, where is the milk, one of those more common types of food purchases, in relationship to the front door? The door that you go into at the grocery store. Yeah, I'm seeing Sandy saying all the way to the back. It's always to the very back of the store. And is it a direct route to the grocery store, to the milk? No, you cannot get there in a straight line. And it's set up that way to encourage us to spend more time at the grocery store, because the longer we spend at the grocery store, the more money we're going to spend. More unplanned purchases will be made. I have spent $20 on a gallon of milk many, many, many times. I just go in for milk and then purchase all kinds of other things because this is a good deal. This is standing out and jutting out into the aisle. Oh, this is something I could use, or I'm hungry right now, I'm going to purchase this. So making sure that we put our list according to the aisles can save us money because we're not running back and forth in the store. Those pharmacies, places to get your haircut, the bank, those are also ways the store can help to encourage us to spend more money, because as I'm waiting for my prescription at the pharmacy, it'll be only 15 minutes. I can do a lot of damage and purchase a lot of food in 15 minutes. And so they know that that's a way to encourage it. Another important thing to do when you think about your list is bring it along. How many of you have written a list and left it at home and then tried to remember what the list is? So encouraging you to bring it along. One participant in our class has suggested if you make a list, take a picture of it so that you, if you don't remember your list, at least you'll have a photo of the list that you had, and then you can use it again and again so that you don't have to start from scratch. So here's a couple of different lists, and the one on the left is that really fancy menu list from Etsy that encourages us to, want it to be perfect, but a list doesn't have to be perfect. And on the right, you'll see one that's just listing the entrees for the day, for each day of the week, or 5 days of the week. Start with that and just writing down that. And as Mary said, making sure that you have a fruit or a vegetable or both for the meals that can be filled in later. It can be on just a simple piece of paper. It can be on your phone. It can be on the back of an envelope, just making sure that you write it down. I mentioned a few of the tricks that we need to know about at the grocery store, but here are a few more. Specials are not always the best buy. So if you've got a special that says buy 3, get 1 free, if it's a name brand, it may still be less expensive to buy the store brand of that same item, depending if it's the same size. So look at what the deal is and compare side by side the other products. The generic brands or store brands are often run on the same production line as the name brand items, with just a different label. So be sure to take a look at those items. It can be very expensive to be brand loyal. And we know that there are certain brands that you may just love that you're not comfortable with getting rid of. It might be that favorite peanut butter or that favorite macaroni and cheese. Then you just want to make sure that you watch for coupons when those come out, stock up. Those sales come up, stock up. So watching for those price strategies, buy 10 for $10, is that still a good deal? Considering those generic or store brand products, packaging will often cost us more, especially when it's for 1 or 2. Those single serving packages or those 100-calorie packages, you're paying a lot for the packaging itself. So creating your own individual packages can save you money. Shop at off-peak hours. Well, why would we want you to shop at off-peak hours? Well, we are encouraging you to take a look at the prices and do some comparison between the name brand and the store brand. And if the store is busy and if you don't feel comfortable in the aisle, if there's just a lot of activity going on, you're not going to be able to take a look and research and see what the sales are. So shopping at that off time can help out a lot. And as we mentioned, making that list and bringing it along. Doing those comparisons about the name, the brands of food, the sizes of the same brands, and different forms of the food, whether it be fresh or frozen or canned or dried. They are all the same food. We just want to encourage you to to get all of them, especially with our fruits and vegetables. Making it once and eating it twice, using those leftovers that can help to save time or money. If you have leftovers and you throw them away, you're wasting both time and money. And so making your own frozen meals, making your own lunches can really help to save money, and then also use the food that you've made. And somebody, Roberta, I believe in the chat said, make sure that when you put it in the freezer, mark it what it is and when you put it in, because when it's frozen, it all looks the same. Recently, I took out what I thought was chili and it was spaghetti sauce. And it was kind of an interesting lunch. So making sure that we write down what it is. Use food ingredients for one meal in one way for another meal later on. Lately, one of my favorite things is making chili. It's getting to be chilly weather. And then I will make it, take that chili later on and put it over a baked sweet potato. And just encouraging you to try, use the same food in several different ways. And then take a look at your storage containers. Not all storage containers are the same. You want them, if you're going to put it in the freezer, you want to have them that they're sturdy enough for freezer use, and freezer bags. They'll last longer. The food is going to stay a better quality if you use a freezer grade container than just any kind of plastic bag that you might have on hand. And so when you're investing in your food, you want to make sure that you have it and it's safe to eat. The food in the freezer is not going to make you sick necessarily, but the quality will be lessened over time, and it could potentially have freezer burn. And one of the resources we're going to be giving you in the follow-up email is a list from the University of Minnesota Extension on storage times. Storage times can vary from food to food item. And so taking a look at, well, how long can I optimally store things in the refrigerator? How long can I store them in the freezer? This holds true for takeout items as well, food takeout items as well. You bring it home, it can sometimes get pushed behind in the refrigerator. And so again, marking when you put it into the refrigerator or the freezer is so important. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mary, and she's going to talk about cooking.
I'm going to give you a few tips of how you can maybe adopt some things with cooking for that one or two, because a lot of times that is one of the biggest challenges, is how to kind of be creative with it and not get in that rut when you are just cooking small amounts. So one thing is to try with different herbs and spices. This can mix things up a little bit, and it can kind of present, it's a little bit more fun too if you just try and be a little bit more creative with some of your foods, especially if that is something that you enjoy doing. So, for example, if you like to make your chicken and you usually put like garlic and maybe a little onion powder on it, maybe try adding a little thyme or a little rosemary just to give it a little different flavor, so you're not always having the same thing all the time. And that can even vary up your leftovers a little bit. So if you have chicken one day, maybe you make it how you regularly make it, and then the next day maybe you take that leftover chicken that you had, maybe chop it up, and then put it in a pan and mix it with some rosemary or some thyme, just to give it a little different flavor than what you had the day before. So you're having leftovers, but it's leftovers with a new look and a new flavor. As I mentioned before, convenience foods can save time, and sometimes they can save you money too. A lot of times some of your convenience foods might be in smaller portions, or maybe you buy a convenience food like a macaroni and cheese type item. And so you don't maybe have a lot of leftover cheese or something, even though cheese is pretty shelf stable in the refrigerator. But there's different things that you can do to kind of add more nutrition to those convenience foods. So like if you do have a boxed meal of some type, making sure you're really getting some vegetables in there. So maybe you make the convenience food, but then add some extra broccoli to it, add some frozen peas to it, just doing things to really get more nutrition into that convenience food that you might be having. And then same with like your prepackaged mixed salads, frozen stir fry vegetables. A lot of those things really can help increase your intake of those fruits and vegetables. And this is a good chance to kind of talk too about some of those different meal plans that you can order and have delivered to your house that have all the ingredients that you can just kind of, dump it together, put it in the oven or mix it up in the pot, and are ready to go. Again, this is something some people like to look at, especially if they're just cooking for one or two people. And initially it is more money, up front. But a lot of people also find that they waste less food because, maybe they get just that one chicken breast versus, a three large chicken breasts that they end up throwing some of them away because they don't have the freezer space. So that is something that you can look into and try it out, see how it works. And if you find that you're throwing less food away, then the extra cost might be beneficial for you because you have less waste. So upfront it might be more, but in the long run, you may very likely be saving it. So same with all of your like prepackaged vegetables and all those different things that you may end up paying more upfront, but you might save some later on. One thing, especially if anybody does live in like a senior housing, especially if it's a senior housing where there's like an activity person or a housing director, is that some senior housing co-ops have kind of gone to where if there's people who want to buy maybe like grapes or like something in bulk that you can get a lot better savings on it. They'll maybe have once a week where they'll do like a shopping list. The director will go out and they will get all those different items and then bring the grapes back and then divide them into smaller portions and then charge people, what it would be for maybe a fourth of a pound of grapes versus a full pound because that's what they can use. So that is certainly something that some places are willing to try and experiment with. Or again, maybe you have a neighbor that you can kind of swap some things out. Maybe they buy the grapes and you buy the 5 pounds of potatoes and you kind of switch it out so that it evens out. And that way you have the variety, but you're not stuck with that big container. And also, depending upon the store, you can certainly ask and see if they would be willing to break some of those things down into smaller containers. For example, if you, instead of buying a 2-pound thing of grapes, maybe they're okay with saying, yep, we'll put one in a smaller container for you that has half a pound of grapes. So there's not the food waste. So something there to also think about. This next one here, it's like when you do cook, make a large batch and freeze your own meals. Large batch here, we're probably referring to just like a regular recipe if you're cooking for 1 or 2 people. A regular recipe can be a large batch, but know that you can freeze those into smaller containers and use them again for later. Seen several things in the chats, lots of ideas of different ways that people store some of those foods. Kelly mentioned making sure they're freezer-proof containers. That's important too. And really just trying to find that variety. And again, keep in mind that that doesn't work for everybody. If you don't have a large freezer space, you might not be able to do that. So then just really trying to make a little bit smaller portions versus those regular batches. Reducing recipes. This, for some people, they really like to reduce recipes. Some people kind of struggle with it. It kind of depends. Most recipes are pretty easy to divide in half. So like on that casserole recipe, if it called for 2 cups of pasta, you can just put in a cup of pasta. That's pretty easy. Where the challenge comes in is when you have like canned foods, because, then what you do with that, extra half can of bean or soup. So sometimes they refrigerate or freeze okay, but a lot of times they don't. So the thing is probably to make sure you're getting it into another container that it's going to store well in. So instead of keeping your, kidney beans in the can, put it in like a glass container or a plastic container, and then really try and think of what are different ways that you can use it up during the week. So again, this is where that meal planning works well, because if you have a casserole with beans in it the first part of the week, then maybe you can do, I've done pasta with like spaghetti sauce and put kidney beans in it instead of hamburger, and that works really well. So that's another way you can use it up. Or then maybe make a soup later on in the week. So really just trying to think ahead of time, what are some of those different ways you can use those half cans? Again, I still really like the idea, if you have a half can of corn or something else, just put it in a container in the freezer. And then when that's full, you can go ahead and make yourself a pot of soup, and that works really conveniently. Add seasonings gradually, because sometimes if you half a recipe, you might find that, your garlic might be a little bit too strong, even though you cut it in half. It's just kind of the way some of the chemistry works out. So you can always add more, but you can't take it out. Also making sure you're checking for the doneness a little bit earlier too. Some things might cook up a little bit faster if you have smaller quantities. And then also, if you're making something in a recipe book, make notes about what works and what doesn't work. And I also make notes on there too, like this is a good recipe, or, don't need to make this recipe again. You can find all sorts of different tables that will tell you how to do the reductions, to divide things in half, or if you decide to third the recipe, you can find them in recipe books. A lot of times you can even go right to your computer, your smartphone, and just say, what's half of 1/4 cup, and it'll tell you what it is. And so if you don't want to do those, calculations and things, so that is really handy to do. There's one that I have found that's really helpful. If you ever have a recipe that calls for an egg, an a large egg actually measures out to 1/4 cup. We have chickens, and when they were just starting to lay, they didn't lay a full egg. So you kind of needed to figure out when they were the large size. And that was when it got to be 1/4 of a cup. So that really helped me when I'm reducing recipes. If I know if a recipe calls for 1 egg, what I typically will do is I'll put it in a bowl and I'll mix it up. And I know that that's 1/4 cup, 1 egg. And if I only need half an egg, once it's kind of scrambled together, I just measure out 2 tablespoons, because that would be, there's 4 tablespoons and 1/4 of a cup. So half of that is 2 tablespoons. So that conversion has helped me a lot in doing different baking recipes where I only need, half an egg, because that's sometimes kind of hard to do. Okay. Other ideas for eating out. It's a great chance to try new recipes, or not eating out when you're eating at home. Really making it a priority to sit down, even if it's just 1 or 2 people, sit down, make it a pleasant environment, because then you're going to enjoy your food more. You're going to get more nutrition out of it because you're not going to be mindlessly eating. If you like, you can put a placemat on, try different foods, just anything to make it a nice environment, especially if there's, 2 people. Really try and get that conversation going versus just sitting down in front of the television. A lot of times that's really easy to do, but really try and engage in some conversation and make the meal a pleasant time. Okay. Eating out, as Kelly mentioned, when you eat out, typically those menus are low in fruits and vegetables. So that's something you can maybe order on the side. And dairy products are typically in the form of ice cream. Places are getting much better about offering milk, especially some of your quick serve restaurants now. Those are readily available. You can even, a lot of times at the quick serve restaurants, they will allow you to order the child size meals. And a lot of times those come with milk instead of a sugar beverage. So that's another nice option. And then really kind of watching the portion sizes too. If you do eat out, the portion size might be larger. You can kind of make sure that you take some of the leftovers and you have them at home, and then you have another quick meal that you can have ready to go. So I think I covered most of these different things on here. There's lots of different things you can do to make sure that when you eat out, it's healthy. Share your food. If you know you're going with someone else, you can split the meal to keep that serving size a little bit smaller, and really kind of aim for those healthy choices, but also remember a variety of foods in moderation. So if there's something that you're going out to eat and you don't have it very often, get what you like, maybe don't eat as much of it, and then take some home and have the leftovers the next day. This is just a little bit more about some serving sizes. A lot of times our serving sizes are just too big. For example, a medium fruit's about the size of a tennis ball. So if you're eating one of those big apples in the fall, it's probably 2 servings. I mean, we do need more fruits and vegetables, but even over time, the calories in the fruit can add up too if you're having excessive portion sizes. Okay. So too, in our chat, you can feel free to share some of the different things, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to lead this part.
Thank you, Mary. So now we've been sharing this whole time, which is wonderful, but we're going to use a Jamboard to help to share some more information. And so we'll put the link into the chat so that you can post it. If you've used the Jamboard before, you know that where that yellow arrow is, that's where you click that Post-it note to get your Post-it note. And you can put 1 food item per choice, your first choice recipe, and then put it in the different categories. And there's 3 different sheets that you can go through. And the first one is, what are some fish ideas? What are some pork ideas? What are some eggs, beans, turkey, and chicken ideas that you came up with? And that green arrow on the top, that's where you'll be able to go from page to page to find the categories, the headings. Oh, and I see things are coming in already, and so I'm going to share my screen with you. Wonderful. There, and as you can see there, people like salmon, egg sandwich on egg English muffin with a slice of cheese. And if you're not getting the Jamboard to work, please feel free to put that more information into the chat. Those were those ideas that you thought about for 1.5 minutes that you wrote down. And then the different categories: lettuce wraps, great, shrimp curry, hard cooked eggs, Here we have the different, somebody said beans and rice. And then this is that third sheet with the kind of the breakfast ideas, the soups and salads and snacks. But you will have access to this Jamboard after as well. Things are coming in fast and furious, Mary. Egg drop soup, hard cooked eggs, tilapia.
Yes, and we had a tuna pasta too that was listed in the chat too. So
Ah,
that was another idea that came through in the chat. I can
I
add
think
that one in there.
Thank you. And I think one of the things about cooking for one or two is that we just get into a rut, and it's nice to see different ideas. What are other people eating for one or two people? What are some of the things that I can make? And sometimes it's going through and looking online and getting ideas, and sometimes it's reading recipe books for inspiration. But this is all very helpful. And again, just keep adding to, please, and we will share this later. I also wanted to share some resources with you as well. And this will be sent to you afterwards in an email for the different resources. Real life good food. We find information from the University of Minnesota Extension, and there are cooking ideas. There are recipes in different categories, ways to be physically active, and just a lot of great information about health and nutrition. So please, if you haven't checked out Real Life Good Food before, please do so. Our neighbor and friend with the University of North Dakota State University to the west of us also has a wonderful resource. And so they have recipes, and here's one that's featuring smoothie bowls. And so take a look at what their information has. And then to the south, our extension neighbor to the south, Iowa State University, they have a real spend smart, eat smart, and wonderful resource. I've not ever had a recipe that hasn't been good from this site. And so it's some great information for you. And then there's myplate.gov. Please consider going to myplate.gov. My kitchen is a part of My Plate, and that is a whole list of different recipes. And what I like about that is that we can go in, and so for example, in the summer when we had just so much zucchini, you can type in zucchini as an item and get many zucchini recipes that you can make. So you can go by category, you can go by meal. It also has an app that you can put onto your phone called Shop Simple. And this is going to find different ways that you can save money locally for you. So some very budget-friendly tips. Please look at your local SHIP. SNAP Ed program. SNAP Ed is the nutrition education arm of SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And we have SNAP educators across the state that can help give you ideas as you're looking for shopping and cooking for one or two. During the pandemic, we put together a menu kit for 2 weeks because people were struggling with what to make and not wanting to go to the grocery stores often. And this still is a good tip and tool for you to use that you can find online on our website. It's designed for 2 people, but most of the recipes are for 4 to 6 people. So we plan for do-overs. And it includes, here are the 2-week menus, and it's very versatile. You can swap out different foods if you don't like them. If you'd rather have something else besides Brussels sprouts, you can put in broccoli or cauliflower or something else, carrots. It includes the shopping list, and you're going to want to go through and look at your pantry staples, but that list will include the pantry staples so that you can check them off and you'll have all of the ingredients that you need for your 2 weeks. And it includes 15 recipes. And here are 2 of the recipes, spaghetti with meat sauce and a Southwestern style rice bowl. And they're recipes that are easy to do. And most are very shelf stable, including a few fresh fruits and vegetables, but you can make it more fresh fruits vegetables if you would like. So now if you can, please in the chat, put in what is one thing you'd plan to do when planning or shopping for meals for one or two. Checking your freezer. Oh, it's coming in, creating smaller freezer containers, basic pantry items, checking your freezer. Small and healthy, making 2 meals and freezing 1. Ice cube trays, that came out a lot. Bouillon on hand. Shop at the small salad bar, that came up as a suggestion for smaller amounts. While you may pay more initially, like Mary said, it may be cheaper in the long run because you will not have as much food waste. Quantities. Going to the library, getting some more ideas. Checking the local grocery store ads. Wonderful. And here's our information, Mary's and my information. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have any questions. We'll be sending out after this webinar the resource list. It will be a little while before the recording comes to you because it will be edited before it's sent to you. Stop sharing. And with that, we say thank you so much for coming today. Greatly appreciated. We hope that you came up with at least one idea that you can use in your family versus cooking and shopping for one or two. And we'll stay on for the next couple of minutes if you have any questions.